Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well, it's good to be with you guys. Hope everybody had a great Christmas, and looking forward to the playoff. I know I'm ready to go and excited. I had a chance to watch a lot of film on both of my two teams in the game here leading into the holiday, and now just kind of ready to really lock in. So I think it's going to be a great college football playoff. I'm hoping that we have a couple really competitive semifinal games. That's not always been the case. But I think the matchups are interesting. I think the fact that we've got two new teams in the playoff this year in Cincinnati and Michigan is very exciting. I think Georgia has only been there once and was number one almost all the season until the very end. And I think that they will be an improved team that will learn from that game against Alabama as they get ready to play Michigan. And I think our matchup is going to be very interesting. I know some people want to try to call it a David and Goliath type game. And I guess in some respects you could say that because Alabama has been there and done that so often on this stage. But Cincinnati is a high-level, high-quality football team, and in certain ways matches up really well against Alabama. So I'm excited and happy to take any questions that you might have about our game.
Todd, we'll start with Ralph Russo at AP. Go ahead, Ralph.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Todd. And
hey, good morning.
Belated happy holidays. So Cincinnati has a couple of really good tight ends, and Georgia's got a tremendous tight end. Michigan uses their tight ends a lot. It's interested, especially from a former NFL quarterback. Is it harder to throw to tight ends? Is it harder to get them involved in the offense? We don't see in the college level quite the usage of tight ends. They try to, but not quite the way it has evolved in the NFL game. And I'm wondering if that may be because of quarterback development, player development, schemes, and things along those lines. What is it about throwing to the tight ends that maybe makes it a little harder, if at all?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think typically things kind of trickle down from the NFL. I don't know that the NFL has always played with tight ends. They didn't always throw as effectively to tight ends as they do in some cases now. And I think that in some cases you see that. I think you see a team like Michigan this year, a team like Notre Dame last year that utilizes formations with multiple tight ends and not only involved in their power running game, but also involved in their play action passing game. And so, I think that depending on what you have personnel wise and what you want to do scheme wise, I think utilizing tight ends can be very, very effective for a couple of reasons. Number one, typically nowadays tight ends that you recruit 4- and 5-star type tight ends are big receivers with great ball skills, and their matchup problems, whether you put a safety on them, typically they're too big for a safety. If you put a linebacker on them, typically they're too fast or shifty or elusive for a linebacker. So I do think if you can work tight ends into your offense, it can be effective. Georgia did that against Alabama. I think that is one of the areas where I think Alabama has to be concerned with Cincinnati, because they've got a couple real athletic, rangy tight ends who are involved in their pass game. And then their leading receiver, Alec Pierce, is much like a tight end. He's a big, rangy wide receiver who's really good at contested catches. So I think that that's a big part. On the other side, I'll say this about Alabama. With John Mechie being out of the game, I would expect Cameron Latu and Jaleel Billingsley to have a much bigger role in this game, in the passing game with Bryce Young, because I think a lot of attention, and rightfully so, will be paid to Jamison Williams. And I think those two tight ends for Alabama have a chance to be a big factor.
Okay, we'll go to Ryan Hennessy, followed by Matt Baker in Tampa. Go ahead, Ryan.
We're at the MEC in Birmingham, and every week, really, Nick Saban doesn't like to compare, but I wanted to ask you to compare. You've seen quarterbacks of Alabama in the past. Obviously, Bryce Young just had a big week up in New York. What's different about him that you've seen that stands out?
The first thing that stands out to me about him is just his incredible poise. And I saw that in game one. We had the Miami game, and it was his first start and, his first time on that kind of a stage. And he just looked so unflappable. And he's looked that way all year. Just a brilliant, brilliant season, deserving of the Heisman Trophy award. The way he played, down the stretch in the Iron Bowl, the way he played against Georgia, the number one ranked team and the best defense in college football, was just spectacular. So it is hard to compare. Mac Jones was brilliant last year. He's having a brilliant year this year, starting for the Patriots, and of course Tua before that. But for as young as Bryce Young was when he stepped into this role, his poise and maturity has been as good as I've ever seen.
All right, next we'll go to Matt, followed by Bill Bender. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Todd, a lot of SEC programs in particular use Alabama as kind of a template or a blueprint for what they do and how they work. I'm wondering if you see anything about Cincinnati that can maybe become a template or a blueprint of sorts for at the group of five level for other schools.
Yeah, I think they do have a good template or a good culture. You hear that phrase or that term used a lot with football programs, but I think that Luke Fickell has built a really nice culture there. I think in a lot of ways very similar to what Matt Campbell's done at Iowa State, which is they work hard in recruiting, and they work just as hard in developing players, because typically they're not going to go head to head with an Ohio State, in the state of Ohio, and fight over 4- and 5-star recruits very often, but they get 3-star and some 4 stars, and they do a great job of developing them and finding guys that fit their culture. It's a very blue collar, hard-nosed mentality. Luke was a former nose guard when he played at Ohio State, and I think the team plays that way. It's a team that kind of plays with a chip on their shoulder. And so I think that template of, understanding who you are and how to recruit to who you are, and then developing the guys once they get there to fit your culture and to fit your team and what you want to do schematically, is a really good model. Now, Cincinnati is going to be a non-Power 5 for a couple more years, but pretty soon they're going to be a Big 12 team. But I don't see them changing their model because, again, where they're at in Southern Ohio is a really good recruiting area. The state of Ohio has been really good to them, but they have to be aware of who they are, particularly when it comes into recruiting against Ohio State.
Okay, we'll go to Bill Bender next, followed by Kirk Bowles.
Hey, Todd, thanks for doing this. You mentioned the David and Goliath angle. I mean, do you think in some ways that's being a little overplayed with this being the first group of 5 team to be there? And you mentioned those areas. What are some areas where Cincinnati could theoretically challenge Alabama?
Yeah, I do think it's just too simple, to phrase it that way. I think Cincinnati is a really good football team. They deserve to be in the playoff. They proved that last year and how they played against Georgia, in the Peach Bowl. So, I mean, this is a team that is worthy of being on this stage and playing in this game. Now, the question I have is, do they have the depth? Do they have the strength up front on both sides of the line to go toe to toe with a team like Alabama that we've seen in this arena for 60 minutes? That's the big question I have. But in terms of where they match up well, I mentioned the tight ends and Alec Pierce, the wide receiver, because if you want to beat Alabama, you have to make contested catches because of how tough the coverage is and the man-to-man coverage that Alabama likes to play. You've got to win some one-on-ones, and they've got guys that can do that. The other area where I think they match up extremely well is this is an excellent secondary led by 2 wonderful corners. I mean, Kobe Bryant is the Thorpe Award winner. The guy on the other side, Ahmad Gardner, is an All-American, has had a great career. The NFL projects him to be a very high draft pick. They've got good safeties. So I think their secondary against the passing game of Alabama, matches up very well. I think it'll probably be the best secondary that Alabama and that Bryce Young have seen all year. So it'll be interesting to me to watch what the strategy Cincinnati has with dealing with Jamison Williams. I've got to believe that they will try to do something to try to make someone else step up to make plays and to win for Alabama. I thought that, before he was ejected, I thought that Auburn had a really good plan against Jamison Williams. They put their best cover guy, McCreary, on him, and they pressed coverage. They got pressure on the quarterback. And for about, 55, 56 minutes of that game, they really controlled everything. So I'll be interested to see what Cincinnati does to try to maybe limit Jamison Williams, not allow him to be the kind of big play threat that he's been all season, and see if they can force someone else to step up. But I think tight ends, wide receiver, cornerbacks are the two best places that Cincinnati matches up. And then I think Desmond Ridder, when he's on, he's a first round draft pick type caliber quarterback, and he's going to have to play that kind of game. He's a guy who can also run, has not run as much this year as in years past, but I would expect his ability to run and to make plays with his legs will be a huge factor if Cincinnati wants to have a chance to win this one.
Okay, next up is Kirk Bowles in Austin, followed by Chris Rankel in Cincinnati. Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, Todd, we're seeing COVID cancel some bowl games, and we see players opt out more and more to get ready for the NFL. Would you be in favor of a playoff system for the group of five separate, or do you favor like the 12-team expansion or even 8 that might include more group of 5 teams?
Yeah, I guess my preference would be an expansion. Again, I think this is great this year that we have a group of 5 team in Cincinnati that finally broke through that ceiling. We've got a new team in Michigan that is part of the Final Four. But I think we would be better served to have an expanded format where just more opportunity. There's more people that might have a seat at the table. And I think the playoff has been great for college football. I think the 4 teams has been good. But I think that more teams would be better. Now, whether that's 8 or 12, I'm not sure what's best, but I do think an expanded format would be better.
Okay, we'll go to Chris Rankel, followed by Calum Squires. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, you obviously we're going to talk a lot about Bryce Young with the season that he's had and the Heisman Trophy and everything. What about Desmond Ridder? How have you seen his game kind of evolve this year, and what can he do to give this Alabama defense fits?
I think he's just a guy who has continued to get better and better as a passer. He's always been dynamic as an athlete. He's always, been that dual threat guy. But when I watched him on film this year, at times, his timing, his footwork, all the things that you want a quarterback to have in terms of being an accurate passer and a high efficiency passer, he's really come a long way in that. And obviously, his quarterback coach was a great player himself at Cincinnati, and you can just tell that Gino's done a really nice job in developing Desmond and working with him. But I think that's the biggest change is his calmness in the pocket, his footwork, his accuracy, all that. I think he can create problems for Alabama because he's always got that ability to extend plays with his legs or become a runner. And again, they haven't had to lean on him as a runner as much this season. But I think in this game, for them to have the best chance to win, I think they'll have to. And then I think finally, the thing that Cincinnati has coming into this game, even though Alabama's got the Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young, who has looked, almost flawless for most of the year, Desmond Ridder has won 44 games as a starting quarterback. He has a whole lot of experience under his belt, and there's not much he hasn't seen in terms of coverages or defenses or anything during the course of his career. So that experience, I think, is a big factor for Cincinnati as well.
Okay, next up is Callum, followed by Fozzie Whitaker. Go ahead, Callum.
Thank you. Hi, Todd.
Hi.
Following on from the question a couple back about the potential expansion of the playoff, this feels like one where Cincinnati's performance could be really impactful for the future landscape of college football on the whole. If they perform well and show that a non-Power 5 team can compete on this stage, do you think that will be impactful in the discussion of the potential expansion of the playoff? Or on the flip side, if there is an underperformance from Cincinnati, do you think that will impact the consideration of future non-Power 5 teams to get a chance to compete in future playoffs?
I think if they play well and perform well, I think certainly that will be used as part of the discussion. I don't think the opposite should be true, though. I don't think there should be that much pressure put on Cincinnati to kind of carry the banner for non-Power 5 schools, because there's been plenty of Power 5 schools in semifinal games that have not fared well, that have gotten blown out. So I don't think you can just put that on Cincinnati, that this is their moment to make a statement. They deserve to be there. And I think, again, they match up well in a lot of spaces. But the outcome of the game, I don't think should be any kind of a determining factor on whether the discussions about expanding the playoffs go forward or not. I've done a playoff game every year since it started in 2014, and we've had lots of Power 5 teams that have been in that have gotten blown out in this semifinal game. So I'm just hoping, as a guy calling the game and somebody who's excited about it, I'm hoping it's a really competitive game from that standpoint more than anything else.
Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
Just a reminder, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function. We'll go to Fozzie Whitaker, followed by Pranav Rama. Go ahead, Fozzie.
Todd, quick question. Pleasure to meet you first off. I think of this game very similar to whenever Utah played Alabama back in 2008, just from the standpoint of Cincinnati running a ton of the spread, RPO, having that kind of mismatch ability with the tight ends as well as the receiver. But I'm very curious on the defensive strategy that you think they may implement to be able to stop Bryce Young, given all of the offensive firepower that he's had all season. So just curious on your thoughts. Cincinnati's ran a ton of man and cover two. Do you think that may prevail against Bryce Young in Alabama?
Well, yeah, that's kind of the $64,000 question right now for Mike Tressel, defensive coordinator, and Luke Fickell, and what their plan's going to be. Because what Bryce Young has proven is, again, his poise, his accuracy, his ability to extend plays if things break down a little bit. He's a very difficult guy to create problems for. And the dilemma you have is, if you want to try to pressure him and play man, then he usually, if you don't get to him, he's going to make big plays happen out of that. If you try to, drop a lot of people and play soft zone like Arkansas did, he's just going to pick you apart, and he's not going to be greedy and force the ball. So I think a couple things. I think you have to try to affect him. And you affect him by, at times, pressuring, at times changing the coverage, at times disguising the coverage, showing one thing and doing something else. You can't give him a steady diet of any one thing. And again, I do think that Cincinnati, with the caliber of corners that they have in Bryant and Gardner, that is a huge plus for them, because if they can somehow limit the effectiveness, the explosive playability of Jamison Williams, and force one of these other receivers to step up and make plays, or a tight end in the passing game, in a lot of ways, I think that gives Cincinnati a great chance to be very competitive in this game. Easier said than done, because Williams can just flat out fly. And that's why I think what we'll see, whether it's always Gardner or whether it's just Bryant or Gardner, whichever side Williams is on, whenever they can get right up in him and press and put a body on him and get hands on him, I think that's what we'll see Cincinnati try to do with him, and maybe play differently with the other guys involved in that pass game.
Okay, we'll go to Pranav, followed by Tyler. Go ahead, Pranav.
Todd, thanks for doing this. Do you think Cincinnati's offense has enough schematically to match up with the Alabama defense? successfully throughout the course of the entire game?
Well, I think they're going to have to get off to a good start. I don't know that they match up. This offensive line has not seen a defensive front like they're going to see with Alabama. They're big, physical, thick guys along that defensive front. They play with great technique, and then you've got a premier player in Will Anderson, who is one of the elite. He and Aiden Hutchinson, the two best players that I saw defensively all season long, just dominant type performers. So it'll be a real challenge for Cincinnati. They're not going to line up and just run the football and slam it at them. They're going to have to be creative. And I do think that Desmond Ridder, the quarterback, is going to have to play an outstanding game. He's going to have to be decisive. He's going to have to get rid of the football when he has to get rid of it. And he's going to have to make some plays with his legs and with his feet, whether by design or just when things break down. And then I think Cincinnati's they've got to win one-on-ones. Alabama likes to play a lot of tight coverage. They like to get right up on receivers. And I think that Cincinnati is going to have to win one-on-ones down the field and make some contested catches. They're very difficult to run on. Nobody has really run the football well against them other than Florida early in the year. But they have given up some plays in the pass game. And I think Cincinnati is going to have to – they're going to have to win one-on-ones down the field in the pass game.
Okay, we'll go to Tyler next, followed by Stephen Smith. Go ahead, Tyler.
Hey, Todd. So obviously the game's at a neutral site and it's being called by a Pac-12 officiating crew. And both teams like to be physical, especially their star cornerbacks. So do you think that that's going to play into the way the game is called or plays out at all? Because the Pac-12 seems to call quite a bit of pass interference this year.
Well, I think a lot of times whatever officiating crew it is from whatever conference, I think you find out early in the game, how the game is going to be called. You're right. Both teams do like to be physical on the perimeter. And so I think we'll find out relatively early in the first quarter, how tightly the game is going to be called. You hope, just like, when the NBA goes to playoffs or when college NCAA goes to, the tournament in basketball, you hope that the referees kind of swallow the whistle a little bit and let them play a little bit more. And certainly in a game like this, you would hope that would be the case. But I think, however it's called, both teams will figure that out pretty early on in this contest.
Okay, we'll go to Stephen Smith and then back to Ryan Hennessy. Go ahead, Stephen.
You brought up Bryce Young and just the defense that he's played against all season for Alabama, but what has impressed you about how comfortable he is, just the feel he has for the game in dictating terms against those defenses?
Yeah, again, going back to the very first game of the year when I saw him against Miami, I was just amazed by his poise and just his calmness, his demeanor. And then when he needed to run or needed to leave the pocket and extend the play, he would do that. But he never panicked. He never left the pocket without keeping his eyes downfield, because when he does scramble, he's looking to buy time to throw more than he is to run. So I was just very impressed with his pocket awareness, with his poise, with his calmness. And that was kind of the case. That was kind of the case all season long. And then his accuracy, you knew he was a great thrower. I mean, he had all the credentials coming out of high school, but when he sets his feet and you give him time, he is going to get the ball in the right place, and you look at, for a first year starter to throw 43 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, that tells you about his decision-making. It tells you about his accuracy and his willingness to take what the defense gives you and not force the ball into bad situations. So I was very, very impressed with what he did all year. And then down the stretch, he was magnificent.
Okay, Ryan, back to you.
Todd, I wonder when you and your team are waiting to see which team you guys are going to call for the college football playoff. It seems like a lot of coaches say, "Oh, it's just any other stadium." But with Alabama and Cincinnati going to Dallas compared to Miami, especially the world we're in now with COVID cases, do you think that's an impact? More of a I know Dallas is a big city as well, but going to Dallas instead of a Miami for Nick Saban and his team?
I don't know. I mean, I'll say this for me personally, I'm thrilled to be able to go to Arlington to do the game because the stadium is it's the greatest TV booth in all of TV. I mean, anywhere we go to do a game, it's the best TV booth. I mean, it's kind of lower. It's not high on top of the stadium. It's great sight lines. It's spacious. Don't know whether the roof will be open or closed, but I don't know. You got two big cities. You got two NFL stadiums in both cases. I don't know if it's an advantage or not, but for me as a broadcaster and our team, if I could do every game the whole season in Jerry World, I would be happy with that.
Okay, back to Chris Rankle. Go ahead, Chris.
Todd, you're an Ohio guy. You spent some time in the state. Did you ever think that there would be a day with how big that the Buckeyes are in this state that UC would be on the pedestal that they are and this program has come as far as it has?
No, it's pretty hard to picture that and to imagine that and to go one step further for you. My dad was an assistant coach at Cincinnati back in the early 70s. So I lived in Cincinnati and, at that time, they weren't a part of any conference. They were just trying to play anybody they could play at that time. And so, there's been guys that have had some success there. I mean, obviously Brian Kelly had success there but what Luke has done is Luke has he's just kind of put his feet in the ground and he's established the culture and his time at Ohio State and being an Ohio guy, I think he understands the state. He understands the recruiting in the state, and they've understood their place, and particularly in terms of where they fit with Ohio State and how you recruit. And so I think it's amazing. And I think he's done a great job. And certainly people have wondered whether he was going to stay or not. And I think that he's been a great fit for UC and the future looks bright. I mean, not only in the playoff this year, but they're headed to the Big 12 and all of a sudden they are, they're a very interesting member of that conference as well, being located where they are.
Okay, we'll go to Matthew Loftus next. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hi, Todd.
Hi.
Belated happy holiday and cute dog in the background. My question is, how much extra preparation do you have to go through to call a playoff game versus calling, a season opener or a middle of the season kind of game?
So I'm a very routine oriented guy. So I try to stick with the same kind of, plan and pattern, which for me primarily is I watch a lot of film and I try to watch at least 3 games of each team, typically the last 3 games that they played. The difference between doing a game now and doing a game, particularly in the beginning of the year or an opening game, is in an opening game, you don't have any new film. You just have last year, maybe their bowl game. You don't know, teams always kind of do something different in the first game. It's actually harder to prepare for a first game. At this point, I can kind of pick and choose whichever games I want to watch.
They interacted with more people probably.
And I watched, I watched a lot of both teams, and I'll watch a little bit more before the game. But from that standpoint, my preparation has been the same. And you just have you have more time, which sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. You maybe over prepare, because hopefully the game on the field is what you end up talking about. But I've had plenty of time to do what I normally do to prepare myself.
All right. Todd, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We'll be watching your game, obviously, Friday, Cincinnati and Alabama. Kirk has now joined, so we can transition into the second part of the call. Todd, thanks again.
Okay. Talk to you guys later.
Okay. We will get started with Kirk here. Just want to, again, please raise your hand if you have a question for Kirk, and we will start the round of questions. First, a multi-Emmy award-winning analyst, Kirk will team with Chris Fowler for the 8th straight year on the CFP. They'll call number 2 Michigan versus number 3 Georgia at the Orange Bowl with reporters Holly Rowe and Marty Smith. Immediately after the game, Kirk, Chris, and Holly will fly overnight to California to call Saturday's Rose Bowl between number 11 Utah and number 6 Ohio State. They'll also be joined by reporter Tiffany Blackman in Pasadena. I'll let Kirk say a few opening remarks about his 2-game assignments, and then we'll get right to media questions like we did with Todd. Go ahead, Kirk, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be with you guys. Happy New Year. Hope everybody's having a great holiday. Just fired up. I just heard the end of Todd there. It's great to hear his voice and gets me fired up. I always enjoy watching his telecasts. I'm a Bull guy. I like the Bulls. I like watching games. So I'm excited to be in a position with our team to go down to Miami. I'm actually going to go to Orlando later today. My son is on the Clemson team, so I'm going to stop in Orlando, watch the Clemson and Iowa State game just as a dad on the 29th, and then head down to Miami right after that game. Get down there late the 29th and get ready to roll. 31st is going to be a lot of fun. Both teams have so much to talk about, the way their seasons unfolded and the way their season, regular season and then conference championship games ended for them. I think adds a lot of the build up and excitement of this game. And then after that game, for me personally, because I grew up in the Big Ten region, I probably get more excited to call a Rose Bowl game than any game that I call all year, just from a personal background, personal history. So looking forward to flying after that game and getting to Pasadena. I actually have a 3-hour game day that morning. Once we land, I think we're just going to go straight over to the stadium and knock out game day. And then later that afternoon, look forward to calling the Rose Bowl. So if anybody has any questions, love to answer them.
Thanks, Kirk. We'll start with Ralph Russo at AP, then we'll go to Aaron McMahon at MLive, the Ann Arbor News. Go ahead, Ralph.
I think you're on mute, Ralph. Yeah. There we go.
I've only been doing this for 2 years. I mentioned to Josh Gaddis, Alabama beats up Georgia's defense. It's the one game all year. He kind of kidded around. It can't be a blueprint if only one team did it. What I would ask you is, do you see things in Michigan's offense that would allow them to maybe take advantage of some of the things that Alabama did to Georgia?
Well, I think the two it wasn't just the scheme. It was 2 players. It was Bryce Young and Jamison Williams. I mean, you're talking about 2 of the elite players at their positions. One won the Heisman Trophy, and the other one, you could have made an argument, had a good enough year to be right there to win it as well, but he was on the same team. So you're talking elite players. Georgia, the one question on Georgia before the game. In fact, we talked, Dan Mullen, the former Florida coach, was on game day that morning. A big emphasis, one of the segments we did was Georgia's secondary and whether or not, if this Georgia front, which has been dominant all year, if they don't get home or Bryce Young is able to create, how good are they really on the back end? We just haven't seen them tested. And that ended up being, as we know, a big part of how that game unfolded was what happened in the secondary. I've gone back and watched that game probably 6 or 7 times. I don't think it's fair to put it all in the secondary. I think the front looked fatigued for whatever reason. They didn't have the same juice that they played with most of the year. But I don't think Michigan has an offense that necessarily you can just draw up a play or a sequence of plays and say, okay, we're going to be in a good spot to run the exact same offensive scheme that Alabama did. Hey, Alabama gave us the blueprint. Let's just do exactly what Bama did, just because that's not their identity. What I've been impressed with Michigan, while the perception of them is an old school, tough tight ends running between the tackles, and don't get me wrong, they are at times that way. But if you've really watched them this year, it's the wrinkles that they bring to the table that are what has made this offense complete. You know, it's a reverse, it's misdirection, it's a halfback pass for a touchdown. It's bringing in JJ McCarthy as a little wrinkle. It's just, they do enough to not allow you to just, hey, it's Michigan, here comes 25-2. Let's put 9 guys in the box. You can't do that against Michigan. And so that's what Georgia and Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning have got to be ready for. If they think it's just going to be I formation, 2 and 3 tight ends and ramming their head into a wall, again, there's going to be plenty of that, but Michigan will find ways to be creative with the wrinkles and then get back to being who they are, which is Haskins' offensive line. But look out, I'm telling you, wrinkles and early down play action pass from Cade McNamara, where they can try to attack the Georgia secondary. I'd throw on 1st and 10 if I were Michigan, not wait till 3rd down against that pass rush led by Nakobe Dean and those blitzing linebackers.
Okay, we'll go to Aaron McCann, followed by Zach at the New York Post. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hey, Kirk, thanks again for doing this. We've talked a lot in recent years about Ohio State obviously dominating the Big Ten. How much of what Michigan and Jim Harbaugh have been able to do this year do you think is sustainable long term?
I mean, to beat Ohio State every year, I mean, that's a year-to-year thing. But I think their program, if you go back to look at 16, I mean, they were right there. It came down to that stop, depending on who you were a fan of. He was either short or he got it. But I mean, they were that close to winning that game. So I think the perception, because there just haven't been wins against Ohio State, the perception, even from some of their own fans. I mean, I travel around the country, and before they had this year, they're Michigan fans that were frustrated. I go back to August. I remember talking with some of you on a call, Angelique most notably, that was like, why is this year going to be any different? And what's going to allow Michigan to kind of take that next step? Well, I think the changes he made to his staff had a lot to do with it. And I think the energy from this team, if you've watched them, that's the thing that I've been so impressed with. And that's not something you can necessarily coach, like Aiden Hutchinson and that dude's focus and drive and leadership, and not just him, but the energy that they played with and the belief that they played with when many people were doubting them in September. I think that drove them all year. And that when they beat Penn State in the fashion in which they had to do it, I think it put them in a spot where they were like, you know what, this is happening. We're going to get Ohio State at home, and we're going to climb the mountain. So this was a special year in 2021. How that impacts 22 and 23 and beyond, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But there's a pretty good nucleus of players on this football team that's coming back, and I like how he builds his team. I like how he develops his players. So I don't know if they're going to beat Ohio State every year, but I see no reason for this program to not be, a consistent competitive program every single year in the Big Ten.
All right, we'll go to Zach at the New York Post, followed by Susan Miller-Degnan at the Miami Herald. Go ahead, Zach.
What's up, Kurt? How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Kind of wanted to switch a little bit, kind of when you look at the big picture of, having a non-Power 5, in the playoff. How significant do you think is that? I know Cincinnati is going to be joining the Big 12, but how significant is that? And how important do you think the result of the game, not necessarily that they have to win, but that they at least give you a representative effort?
I think it's great. I think, we've had going all the way back to Boise State at the BCS and going back to TCU, and I think Utah one year, they were up there and felt that they had a team that should have been in. There's always been these kind of discussions for a long time. And then, of course, with UCF, when they had some great teams, it's like they just needed an opportunity, I'm sure is how they feel. And now Cincinnati, I think a lot of that's kind of that work equity that some of these other teams did put Cincinnati in a position and competing against Georgia, by the way, in the Peach Bowl last year, and then winning all their games this year, put Cincinnati in a spot where now here they go, and I think you're right. I'm not necessarily doing it. I'm not saying Cincinnati's carrying the flag for the group of five, but you know how the world works. That will be the perception. If they lay an egg and they get blown out, there will be many that will say, see, I told you all along. Right. My colleague Lee Corso, he doesn't think Cincinnati should be even in the discussion, like anybody from the group of five. He's like, you guys go over there at the little kids table, leave us alone. I mean, if he were on here right now, he would just tell you that. I don't think that. I think that, if there's a team that makes a run and has a great year, then let's put them in and see how they do. But I do think you're right. People will jump to conclusions. I think they're going to compete in the game. I don't see them getting blown out. I think they match up fairly well. It's tough to match up with Alabama, as we all know, but I think their corners give them a chance defensively. They got a defensive line that's undersized but quick. They're a veteran team, so I don't think they'll be in awe of looking over and seeing Alabama. And then Desmond Ridder's going to have to make some plays. But yeah, I think what you're saying is fair. There definitely will be a lot of people that will be watching to see how Cincinnati does, and they'll try to kind of take the low-hanging fruit, whether they are competitive or they win the game. Then it's going to be like, I told you they should have been in it all along. Or if they get blown out, it's going to be, I told you they should have never been here to begin with. So you're going to get that kind of reaction. That's the world we live in. I personally will not. To me, it's a case-by-case situation. But I do think they have a shot to be competitive. And I think the Georgia game gives them some confidence, coming into this game, because they outplayed Georgia for really about 58 minutes of that game and lost on a last-second field goal.
Okay, next up is Susan in Miami, followed by Angelique. Go ahead, Susan.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Kirk.
Sure.
My first question is going to kind of be my follow. I just wanted to know your thoughts on what's going on with COVID and all these teams pulling out of bowls, including Miami in the Sun Bowl. And my other question is just in Mario Cristobal's introductory presser, he mentioned lightheartedly, but he was serious too, that he had to thank you for prompting changes in Miami. Do you feel like your commentary on game day contributed to significant changes, and is Miami in a better place than a month ago?
I don't ever like to take credit for anything. I just tell you, I had a lot of conversations after I made those comments, and they were heartfelt. I didn't have an axe to grind. I like Miami. I grew up in the 80s when Miami was Miami, and got close to their program in 01, 02, 03, and did a lot of their Thursday night games and game day, and got to know the personality and really a different way of respecting it. And so I've always had a kind of a spot for their program. And I've just, what I said, whatever I said, I can't even remember specifically what I said, came from my heart, because I want to see them have a chance to be competitive. And so, but I got a lot of calls from, the athletic director, who was the AD at the time, and people on the board. And when the dust settled, I did get a lot of people that reached out and as you say, thanked me for what I said. And if it helped propel change in a positive, especially when it comes to funding, then great. Then that's a great thing. But I'm definitely not one to say, oh yeah, it's because I'm not doing that. But Mario did reach. He and I talked before his presser. He was on a plane, and I'm fired up for him. He's a great coach. He lived it. I actually brought it up to him. I did a couple Oregon games this year, and he and I have a pretty friendly relationship. And it was just he and I one-on-one, no cameras rolling, no microphones, and just kind of BSing about their game that they had. And I said, hey, dude, by the way, I said, this whole Miami thing that's going on, I said, is that this is like late October. I go, is that a possibility? I know you're in Oregon and everything. He's like, we'll talk about that later, And so he didn't say no. He just kind of said, yeah, maybe that's something we can talk about later. And so it made me think at that time, maybe. And then the coaching carousel got wacky. And of course, he ended up going back home. I'm excited for him. Nobody knows it better than a guy that lived it. Nobody knows that brotherhood, which is unique and strong, like he does. So as much as I am a fan of Manny, and I think Manny's going to do a great job at Penn State, you can't make up for a guy that is part of the program and played on great teams. So yes, not to take anything away from Manny, but because of who's coaching and because of his life and where he grew up and where he played, he's at his alma mater. So yeah, I'm excited for him and for the program, and especially if they back him with finances and give him a chance. Your other question, as far as COVID and everything going on, like everybody else always says, I don't really follow politics. It seems like every time you say COVID, it's like everyone gets scared. Whatever I'm saying is only my own personal feelings. I tested positive almost a year ago to the day, and I still can't smell or taste like I did before. Still, I'm at a 6, maybe 7 out of 10 on taste and smell. That's a year later. So it's not that I don't appreciate it. I've had friends that become really, really ill from this. But I'm a guy that if they say get a vaccine, where do I go? Where's the line? Okay, over here, boom, I'm getting the vaccine. I need my second one, boom, I'm getting booster. Sounds good. Let's get whatever it takes to get back to living our lives. I personally sign up for, just me, not because I'm into politics. That's just my choice that I've made. And after having it and dealing with this for 12 months, I'll do whatever they ask. I think these players, from everybody I've talked with, I have a son that plays at Ohio State, son that plays at Clemson. I'm not sitting up at night thinking, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my kids. They're all vaccinated. And so I guess I could worry about them getting hit by a car. I could worry about a lot of things, but I choose not to. And so they've done everything they need to do to protect themselves, and we move on. That's kind of my take on it. Hate to see all these games canceled. I'm hoping no more games will be. Hopefully we'll get these bowl games going. They seem to really crank up on the 28th, starting tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be good with the semifinal games and the national championship. And I hope the protocols that were set up during the 2020 season will be updated before we get ready for the 2022 season.
Thank you.
Right. Let's go to Angelique, followed by Conor Riley at Dog Nation. Go ahead, Angelique.
This is just any.
I wanted to ask you about Cade McNamara and JJ. And speaking to you as a quarterback, a guy who played the position, how challenging is that dynamic if you're the starting quarterback when you've got a guy like JJ right behind and doing really fine things when he comes in?
Well, I think, Angelique, on top of that, he came in as when was the last time they recruited a quarterback with this much hype as JJ McCarthy? I can't recall. I mean, Shea Patterson had some hype, but he was transferring over from Ole Miss. Talking about a high school recruit. I mean, maybe Chad Henne, maybe going back to him. I mean, I know Denard Robinson came in with some hype, but there was talk about him maybe playing other positions, and eventually he was the guy at quarterback. But I can't remember Michigan having this kind of expectations. And every time he would come in games in September, the student body and the fans were like, oh, here he is, our savior. So I think you have to add that on top of where we are at this point. Man, Cade McNamara, to me, I just tip my cap to the guy. There are probably not a lot of people on this call who don't follow the Big Ten or Michigan that know anything about Cade McNamara. They're probably not really. When you watch Michigan, you see Aiden Hutchinson, you see that defense, you see Hassan Haskins, you see Blake Corum, you see that offensive line. Nobody nationally talks about the job that Cade McNamara has done, the leadership that he's displayed. And I think part of that leadership is when things are going in that second or third series and you look over and here comes 9 jogging onto the field. And to not be like, because you're a competitor, right? Not to be like, what the hell is going on around here? But instead to be like over there, first guy cheering for him when he does well, says a lot to me about his wiring. I'm probably more impressed with how he's handled that than the way he's played this year, because that is a big ask from a starting quarterback who still at the time was trying to establish himself as the guy. It wasn't like this is a 2 or 3 year starter. He was still trying to say, hey, I'm the guy, not this rookie. And here comes this rookie in to take some valuable reps away from him. And so, yeah, it's a thing that I'm going to talk about quite a bit on the broadcast, a thing that I really respect and admire. And I think he's had an incredible year for that Michigan offense this year, and not just making plays, like I said, providing outstanding leadership and belief that they can win games.
All right, next up is Conor Riley, followed by Dave Jones at Penn Live. Go ahead, Conor.
Hey, Kirk, hope you're doing well. Wanted to ask you, how should this Georgia offense go about attacking this Michigan defense? And then obviously the quarterback position at Georgia, it's always sort of a question mark under Kirby Smart as far as, are they getting the most out of it? How does Georgia, and I guess Kirby as well, sort of go about dispelling that narrative that they are getting the most and the best out of their quarterback situation?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, we just talked about Cade McNamara. Stetson Bennett's another guy that I remember when he came in for Mathis, and I didn't know who he was. I didn't follow his story at that point, and he came in, and I respectfully, he looked like just a little guy coming out there, and I think people have doubted him his whole time he's been there, and I think it's provided this chip that we now have learned to love about his game. And even with everything he's done, there's still people within the, your own people that cover the team and especially the fans that are like, where's JT Daniels? First, for example, in the Michigan game, if he throws a pick, you can just feel the energy like, when is JT Daniels going to be in there? What the hell are they doing kind of thing? And yet this guy's been incredible. I think his mobility has been critical to just keeping plays alive and a good complement to what they're doing with the running game with White and Cook. How do you get over that hump? You beat Michigan, you play in the national championship, you play well, and you beat Alabama. Other than that, I don't know if anything's going to allow this perception. And by the way, I don't agree with it, but I think that's, yes, how do you change that narrative? That's what you do. You don't turn the ball over, play. You don't have to be Bryce Young. You don't have to be Joe Burrow throwing for 525 the other day against the Ravens, but you do have to go out there and make some plays and put the ball in the money and not turn it over and win. And then you go to Indianapolis, you do it over again. You avenge a loss, the only loss of the year. That would make the narrative completely go away. Anything short of that, I think you'll find people that will be questioning whether or not they made the right call in going with him all year. Again, please don't put me in a position where I'm agreeing with that. I just think that'll be the narrative from a lot of people.
Okay, let's go to Dave Jones at Penn Live, followed by Andy Evans at Columbus Wired. Go ahead, Dave.
Hi, Kirk. How are you?
Good.
Josh Gaddis, young coordinator. What do you think his dynamic has been with Harbaugh? Coordinators and coaches with an established mindset. Maybe speaking of narratives, maybe I've been part of that perception with Harbaugh and little Bo and all that. But how do you think that dynamic has worked this year, and what's been the result of it?
When he came in, he was coming out of Alabama, as you know, and it was all about he's going to bring the spread of Mike Locksley and what Tua and Alabama was doing and kind of revolutionize Michigan's offense. That was speaking of narrative, that was the talk. They were going to be spread, and Shea Patterson was there, and it was all about getting athletes out in space. And I think what he quickly found was they didn't have a ton of difference makers at their skill spots when he first got there. And I think through trial and error, I give him a lot of credit, him and Jim Harbaugh, a lot of credit. for instead of just saying, nope, this is the offense. This is the reason I hired you. This is what we're going to do. We're going to be a spread team. I give them a lot of credit for playing to their strengths. And what was their strengths when they came out of camp? The strengths was the running backs. The questions were really, believe it or not, can the offensive line win the line of scrimmage when they have to? And of course, how good can they be at quarterback and receiver, especially when Ronnie Bell went down, who's like the alpha, the guy. And so it's easy to look at them right now and say, that this is a great offense. But my gosh, from where they were last year, and I know it was a shortened season, that offensive line had major concerns. And a lot of that had to do with they were getting behind and became very predictable where they had to throw the ball, but they struggled. And what they've done, I think, up front now with Shrum Moore, the offensive line, that to me has been a big part of their story. And then the recognition from Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gaddis to say, and go back again to where they were in September to who they became. I think they became a team that realized we can win games by getting big. We've got tight ends that can allow us to go with 12 personnel with one back and a couple tight ends. Let's pound people. And let's figure out where we are at quarterback. And so they kind of came full circle back to Jim Harbaugh's roots, which is, being an old school, Big Ten style of offense with some wrinkles sprinkled in, from time to time. But that's not what, as you know, David, that's not what they hired. And so I give Josh Gaddis a ton of credit and really admire his ability to bob and weave and not say, nope, this is my system. These players have to learn my system, and that's what we're going to do. To me, he has showed that you can mold your system to your strengths, and that's what they've done this year. And it's been incredibly resourceful and very smart move by that entire offensive staff, led by Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gaddis.
Thanks, sir.
All right, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Let's try to do Andy Evans in Columbus and then Trevor Allen at KSL Sports to talk about Utah before we finish up. Go ahead. Andy, you're on mute. Sorry. Far away.
I don't think he is, but I can't. No. There we are. Nope. Dang, I thought we had him there.
Let's switch it up, Andy. Hold on just 1 minute. Let's go to Trevor, and then we'll try Andy after that. Thank you.
Kirk, I've actually got two questions about the Utes. First one, you've obviously watched a lot of really talented players throughout the year. Where does Devin Lloyd rank among that, especially when you watched him in the Pac-12 championship game? And then number two, given what Utah's gone through with two tragic deaths over the last year, have you seen a team do of what they've done going through so much tragedy in 1 year?
Yeah, I have been just in awe of their season, losing one player and then losing another player who was honoring him wearing the jersey, and the families involved there, and the team going back to the funerals, and then starting the year 1-2, and then making a switch at quarterback to Cam, and then to fight through all that and really stay incredibly unified through all that. They've been one of the great stories of the year in college football, and having a chance to be around them, the Pac-12 championship. You do Zooms like we're doing right now, and one of the players they put on was Devin Lloyd, and I've followed his career and always been impressed with him. But when you sit down for 30 minutes with him, you just start talking and hearing his story, and I was just blown away. I mean, here's a guy that was kind of long and lanky out of high school, one offer basically. I think it was UNLV. I think Boise, he mentioned, came in late on him. And he ends up going to Utah as just a projection of who he could maybe become. And he obviously becomes an All-American and eventually a first-round pick. His dad was in the military. He's a very serious dude. I love that he helps the young freshmen linebackers, during the week. Imagine this. Here's a guy that takes the young guys on defense into the film room and teaches them how to study film. He's like a coach. In fact, I do a show called The Herbies at the end of the year, and I give an award called the Ultimate Herbie, a player that kind of represents everything that's right about the game, being a great player, but also being a great teammate and just doing everything that I love to see a player do. And he was a finalist and actually won that award as my Ultimate Herbie, because I just think he's the total package. He's everything you want to see. I can just already picture him playing for like the Steelers or the Patriots, and like one of those guys that people are like, where'd that guy come from? Oh yeah. He's playing for 9-10 years as a starting linebacker for Bill Belichick. He's that kind of guy. Tremendous leader, incredibly motivated, came back this year to win the Pac-12 and get to the Rose Bowl. Like, if you can't pull for Devin Lloyd, you don't care. He's been great, very incredibly kind of representative of who this Utah team is this year. And I'm excited to get to Pasadena and have a chance to see them and the Buckeyes go toe to toe.
Speaking of the Buckeyes, let's go to Andy now. He'll have the last question, and he's asking about Ohio State. Go ahead, Andy.
Do you got me now?
Yeah, I do.
All right. I figured it out. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Kirk. Yeah. And Kirk, you talked about in your intro there, obviously the prestige of the Rose Bowl. You're an Ohio guy. You're an Ohio State guy. You understand it. Do you happen to have any insight when it comes to Ohio State, their feelings towards being in the Rose Bowl, and whether or not they should view it as a consolation prize of sorts, considering that Ryan Day said right after they were named as going to the Rose Bowl that it wasn't really what they wanted out of the season. They obviously play for championships and wanted to make the playoff, but now they're going to the Rose Bowl. Just didn't know if maybe you had some insight into that.
Well, Woody Hayes coached a lot of years. Earl Bruce was at Ohio State, John Cooper, Urban Meyer. And I think even before we had a BCS and we had a playoff, the goal was always to go to the Rose Bowl. For Bo Schembechler, it was to go to the Rose Bowl, right? How often did they actually go to the Rose Bowl? Not very often. And yet they still went to another bowl game, and they still were excited to go play in whatever bowl game that they went to. I just don't buy into this narrative of meaningless bowl games. These teams have always had goals. The high-profile teams have always had goals to get to the championship or to get to a certain bowl. And it doesn't happen all that often. But you don't throw in the towel and say, well, we didn't accomplish our goals, so we're not real happy about going to this bowl, but we're gonna go. I was on a team that did that. We lost to Michigan in 1990. And back in those days, you fell way down, and we went to the Liberty Bowl, and we had players on our team that were basically bad-mouthing the city of Memphis and the Liberty Bowl publicly to the media. And we went down to Memphis, and they hated us. And I don't blame them, for the things that were said after that Michigan loss. To me, I get being upset. I get like, hey, we didn't accomplish our goal. We didn't beat our rival. We didn't go to the Big Ten championship. We didn't go to the playoff. But hey, man, we're going to the Rose Bowl. Like, it's the Rose Bowl. We used to have to try to deal with the consolation prize of the Citrus Bowl, but this is the Rose Bowl. And, maybe these players that are struggling to understand it, maybe when they get out there and they get out on that field, maybe it'll dawn on them like why this bowl is different or why it's unique. And I hope they do. I get being disappointed, but you got to shake it off and move on to the next game, and get the bad taste out of your mouth. It's not like because we have a playoff that teams before a playoff didn't achieve their goals and still went to play at their bowl game and look forward to it. I don't get it. I never will. If you're a competitor, you like to play in a game, and let alone 100,000 seat stadium and a ranking, or a TV rating that'll be as high as a semifinal. My God, there's the tradition, which I know today's player doesn't really get that, but I think you do once you get there and you get into that stadium. I think you start to feel it a little bit more, but I hope this isn't our new norm. I hope it's just an era that we'll somehow get out of. But I think the quote of meaningless bowl games, is the Akron game a meaningless game in September? Are we just going to pick and choose where a game has meaning? Your team is playing an effing game. Like, it matters. You go play and you go compete your ass off. That's what you do. That's your job. I don't get meaningless. I never will.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Okay.
All right. Kirk, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We know you got a busy week, and we will be watching both the CFP semis in Miami as well as the Rose Bowl. Good luck this week with your assignments.
Okay.